Afternoon and welcome to Sliced. Sliced is all about taking the big topics in marketing and breaking them down into bite-sized pieces. We want simple to understand, simple to act upon, and insightful. Today, we're talking about how businesses who have received either financial investment or are about to receive financial investment should look at their marketing and how they go about deciding how much they should be investing, what they should be investing in, and how to show their investors a return on that investment. And to do that, I'm delighted to be joined by Gio Finocchio from Midven, a venture capital business based in Birmingham, and Chris Bourne, who's head of marketing at Natural HR, a SaaS-based HR business who have received and are using venture capital business funding to scale their business. So, gents, great to have you both here today. Thanks for joining us. And to kick off, I thought I'd just, lead in with Chris first. So it's been a fairly interesting 15 to 18 months, I guess, Chris, for everybody. So I'm interested, how's business for Natural HR and what kind of impact has the pandemic had in the last 15 to 18 months on your business?
Yeah, I mean, from a SaaS point of view and from Natural HR point of view, I mean, it's been a little bit up and down, the same as most businesses. Not quite hit as hard as, let's say, the retail or hospitality sector, where that was completely closed down. But it did limit certain opportunities, and especially roughly about last March or so, when that first lockdown happened, we was having conversations within the business about, we don't know what to expect. We need to try and plan for the future, and we have to also look at worst case scenario. Is that, are we going to get any more sales? Are we going to lose customers and things like that? But fast forward to today and looking back over that time, what we've actually seen is we still have grown the business. I think we're about 29% or so in terms of revenues.
Fantastic.
So, we have still got some, some really important wins and that over that period. And also, I think, because of what we actually do as Natural HR, we're HR and payroll software. I think a lot of the pandemic and a lot of people have started to realise the importance of HR software for employees. So there's a lot of digital transformation that's happened within our customers. A lot of working from home, obviously, as well. So having that sort of collaboration through a tool has started to become one of their priorities. So as we went through last year and still continuing to go through, a pandemic, we've started to realise that actually HR software has become, a sort of need for a business rather than a want. And we started to try and reposition ourselves for that. And, from a marketing perspective, I suppose, so I'm talking obviously from a business perspective, but from a marketing perspective, it's been a little bit different because we used to go to live events. We used to do quite a bit with relationships, I suppose. We was all in the office and everything, and like many others, we've worked from home as well. So we've had to sort of distribute some of our budget onto online channels. So trying to get away from those live events, really. We've done a couple of virtual events, which, depending on your opinion, whether they're better or worse than live events is another topic, I suppose, for another day.
Yeah.
What we started to realise that it's more around how can we target those people while they're working from home. Things like direct mail, and that is so difficult to try and get hold of people because we don't have their home addresses, only their business addresses. So from a marketing perspective, we've had to change things. But from a business perspective, we've had some challenges, but I think we've come out stronger, and most businesses as well have probably come out stronger as well with that digital transformation that's happened.
That's really, really interesting about the digital transformation side, and something certainly, as an agency, we've seen a lot of companies, and having to find different ways to target their customers. We've definitely seen that with our customers and customers who've been invested in, really have to sort of pivot their thinking as to how they're going to reach those target audiences they've always had. So that's really fascinating from our side as well. We've definitely seen that. So.
Yeah, I think just to chime in on that, on the digital transformation part, you've got to look at it and think what have been the most important things of what we've needed from a business continuity point of view over last year. And what they probably thought 2 years ago was going to be the things they was going to invest in changed overnight. So you look at the way that Zoom has, improved so much. Everyone seems to have jumped on the bandwagon with that. Same with HR software, and same with a few other things. So, a lot more people are doing contactless payments as well, if you're in retail, for instance. And I think it's just accelerated that side of it. And I don't see that slowing down at any point either.
Okay, that's really interesting. And Geo, I guess people will be really interested to hear, I suppose, 15, 18 months ago, you had an investment plan across Midven's portfolio. This is what you're looking for, the kind of businesses you were looking to invest in. I'm, I guess, interested in the same sense from your perspective as an investor. How's the last 15, 18 months been for you, and what's the impact been from your side of things?
Yeah, it's been different, obviously. It's not something we're expecting or forecasting, but I echo Chris's initial sentiments. Apart from the first few months where nobody knew what was going to happen, and after those first few months, everything started to settle down a bit, and in the main, our portfolios really fared well during the last 16 or so months. And again, Chris is right. Most of those companies have now had to increase their reliance on online marketing, and that's the trend we've seen. For example, Chris has already mentioned it. When your customers and your prospective customers are working from home, therefore you have to use different methods to reach them. And I know that we've got a number of software-based businesses, and they've seen their market grow because obviously their service is in demand, but they've had to communicate that service in a different way to reach those prospective customers. And many of them, reached out to online, social media, and obviously Google campaigns and that sort of thing.
And I suppose, obviously, for a business like Chris's, at Natural HR, for example, where I guess you've got a software solution, digital transformation solution that's quite well, potentially, in the right kind of space to take advantage of the digital transformation sort of piece we're talking about here. But I know you also invest in more traditional types of businesses as well, Geo. So I'm interested into sort of how those businesses have reacted. I guess it's quite interesting also.
Well, yes, we have some more traditional type businesses, but they still rely on reaching out to customers. And in today's environment, whether you're a B2B supplier or whether you're B2C, your audience is on the web, online. That is how to reach most audiences, particularly in a pandemic when traditional methods aren't working. So telesales perhaps won't work because you haven't got people in offices. So you can ring an office, but you're not going to get an answer if they're all working from home. You may not have their own, the prospective mobile phone, so you have to reach out to them. And it's quite interesting. It has more people working from home. Maybe one or two of those had more time on their hands because, again, there was uncertainty in their business as they were looking for solutions online. So therefore, they were using the online platforms to actually research potential suppliers to them. So, you have to have an online presence.
It's fascinating, and both of those comments, as I listened to what Chris was saying, and what yourself saying, Gia, there's almost an acceleration there between people realizing they had to move online or take certain changes in their business, what they chose to invest in, that you were referring to there, Chris, and they've almost had to just sort of jump forward a series of steps that they might have previously sort of taken a little bit more time to get through. So it's been interesting from that perspective.
Yeah, I think most businesses, if you talk to them beforehand, they probably about 20% would say that they wanted to implement some sort of new digital tool within that sort of next year. Most businesses would say to get to the level what we actually got to overnight would take almost 10 years because of the culture change that would have to happen with it. But when you're forced into a situation like that, it's proof that you can do it within weeks rather than 10 years. It's actually the companies themselves which set that culture. So, and the employees will follow. So if the leadership puts in the right sort of processes in place and that, then the rest will just follow anyway. So things can happen quickly.
It's a really interesting sort of general business insight, that, I think, in terms of what's possible when it has to happen, right? Okay, that's really, really interesting. So I guess one of the sort of next question, I suppose, and I think I might go to Gio first on this, is around kind of, Gio, you're looking at multiple business plans, different pitch decks from different companies coming forward to you looking for investment. When you're looking at those pitch decks, what sort of emphasis are you placing on how important is that sort of clear plan and a sensible level of investment in marketing when you're reviewing those plans? I'd be interested to perhaps expand on that a little bit for me.
Yeah, I mean, a clear plan is a fundamental from my perspective. I mean, it shows any investor that you understand your marketplace. And obviously, if you understand your marketplace, it gives that investor a little bit more confidence in your capability of growing the business. Very few companies we see articulate their marketing plans well. So it's only after you interrogate them further, and drill down into the detail that you realize, well, actually they have got a marketing plan, but they've perhaps not articulated it. So it's probably one piece of advice to those companies that are looking to raise investment is to ensure that they do drill down and articulate their plans properly rather than just, gloss over it.
When you talk about that articulation of a plan, because I think it's a really interesting point, what does that sort of roughly look like from your perspective? What does a good articulation of a plan look like, Gio? If you're 3 or 4 key points that you were sort of looking for, maybe.
Well, the key points from my perspective is demonstrate to the investor that you really know your marketplace. Who the customers are, the segments you're going to go after. Who the competitors are in that market, and how you're going to reach them. Right. And they're the key things from an investor's point of view.
I mean, as a marketeer, those aren't those are the top 3 or 4 things that you would want to include. I mean, that doesn't make it's not a change of anything new there, but it's really important to understand that knowledge of your customer is at the center of it, isn't it? If we don't know who we're talking to, and I think. Chris and I spoke off air, before this a while back, and it's echoing similar things, I think. So, from your perspective, Chris, that when you're setting out a marketing plan, obviously you're the head of marketing at a business, so hopefully I'm sure you've got a clear plan in place. But when you're working both with your sort of the senior team at Natural HR and obviously with an investor that you have, what are you looking to do in your marketing plan, and what's important from your perspective?
Yeah, well, I mean, from what Gio just said there, I suppose the most important part for me is just understanding your market. You can understand your market and identify those opportunities in a few ways. You can get figures from, the Office of National Statistics, from the government, so you can understand. So let's say, for example, you're targeting businesses with, 1,000 employees or more. Or a certain revenue. Let's say they've got 10 million revenue or more, and they're based in the UK. Now, how many of those companies are actually out there? You might think like we need to sell 500 deals, let's say, of whatever a deal looks like within your business, but you might only have 1,000 companies that you can target within the UK. Now that doesn't become realistic. You can't win 1 in 2 of every one of those, and then what happened for year after that and things. So the first point to call is understand the market. How many companies or people are there to actually target? What are their demographics? What do they look like? You can use data tools such as Dun & Bradstreet, ZoomInfo, Doodle. Any of these will give you that sort of information. And what I've done in the past as well, when I've started at Rolls, I've taken all of the data, what we have, looked at how many customers we got, what industries they're in, cross-reference that against the data which I can get from these data sources, and then try and understand what industries do we work well in, what percentage of that market do we have, not only in our CRM system, but also one. So as an example of that, it could be in a certain industry, there's 200 companies. We have 2 customers from that industry, but we also know about 100 of those or so, which is in our CRM system. So that gives us roughly about 50% or so left to go at. So it's worth understanding what opportunities are left that we don't know about, and which ones are there which we do know about. So that's always the first thing I would say, is understand the data behind the opportunities. The second one for me, being in a marketing plan which I'll create, is then how do you filter that through into what an MQL and SQL looks like. Me and Gio obviously talk on a monthly basis about this, so what criteria does an MQL look like, and what other customers that you really want on board. So what is that ideal profile, I suppose? So once you start looking at that, you can start to reverse engineer what that should look like. So as an example, let's say you've got a business or a growth target, which is about 500,000 a year, just as an example, and that's going to be new revenue. So if each customer, let's say, is 25,000 on average, you're going to need 20 customers to actually hit that target. So if your close rate is, let's say, an industry average of something like 5% from MQL to customer, that means you're going to need 400 leads at your current conversion rate to actually hit your target for the year. Now, if you don't generate that already, and you don't know where those channels are that are generating those leads, that's going to be really difficult for you to hit. It's fair enough in your plan saying this is going to be my target, but without understanding what channels drive those leads, and that's going to be one of the most important things. And then obviously the next part from that is setting a SMART goal. Hopefully most people understand what SMART goals are, but it's basically specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So an example of that would be, generate 50 MQLs from paid search before the 31st of December, so you have a target that you can work towards. So if you're going to put one thing in your market plan, it's got to be a SMART goal. What is it that you're trying to achieve? And I would say only put a maximum of 2 or 3 goals into your market plan, maybe even only one, because if you dilute it too much, it's going to be really difficult to try and hit those. So it could be one for customers, a certain thing around customer retention. It could be one around lead gen, and I'd say that would be enough. And then really the final thing from me, what I would put into that is positioning. So Gio mentioned on this a little bit earlier, but it's how do you position to the right people? Now, a lot of businesses, in my past life as well at a previous company, I've done a few workshops and that where business owners, especially on startups, they would say, someone would ask them a question, what is it that you do? And they tell them exactly what it is they do. If we take natural HR as an example, we say we're HR and payroll software. But what not many people actually ask is, well, why do you exist? Why did the business start? Why should I buy into you? So always start with that why. So that why can be the core belief of a business. Move into the how. So how do you achieve that? And how do you fulfill this core belief? And then it becomes the what. This is actually what we do as a business. So for natural HR, as an example, our why would be to enable modern workplaces to thrive. That's why we exist. We want to help people to thrive as a business. How we do that is by relieving HR departments of their admin burdens. They can better fulfill their people role and further add to strategic direction within the business. So we're giving them that opportunity to have a seat at the table at a board, where they can put their people knowledge and everything into the business. And what is it that we do to achieve that? Well, we're all-in-one cloud HR and payroll software, so that's what we do to try and achieve it. So always think about flipping it on its head, and you'll probably get to the point where you really understand where you should position yourself. So I would say putting all of that into your plan should be the first and foremost. Get the data, understand the data and where your leads come from, and then how do you position yourself based on that data? And an investor looking into that level of detail, you're going to be one step ahead of every other opportunity that's out there. And the whole point of getting investment is that you're the most, you're the best opportunity, I suppose, that's out there in the market for them to invest in.
That's really, really good. Thank you, Chris. I mean, that's super. That's a really lovely sort of summary of what you'd want to be capturing. And I guess, Gio, you'd be sitting there going, yep, if I got that, that would be terrific from an investment point of view. You know, we'd understand what we're dealing with. But there was one point there, there was a couple of things in there that I thought were interesting that I'd sort of throw towards you, Gio, but feel free to jump across. One was the word realistic, which I quite, which I think you mentioned earlier around the data point, didn't you, Chris? And I thought the other one was the amount of sort of goals that you were setting, the sort of 2 to 3 maximum. And I suppose perhaps they're linked in together for me. You know, I guess it can be tempting for a company who's looking for investment to come in with all sorts of interesting promises, exciting opportunities, and the like. So I guess, and I'm sure one of your key skills is picking out the promises from the real opportunities. So I'm sort of interested to know kind of how you go about picking that apart and sort of seeing which are the realistic pitches and where are the plans that are coming to you, which perhaps are a little bit over optimistic.
Well, I suppose most plans are over optimistic. So I think from my perspective is we need to drill down and understand what the business is capable of. And that comes from really, you know, what is the understanding of that marketplace? And to add to what, I mean, Chris is exactly right, you know, said everything that, you know, that I'd expect. I'd just like to add on top of that, as I think is you need to really understand your competitors.
Right.
And understand their plans, what they're doing, how they're marketing themselves, how they're communicating, because, you know, you're not operating alone in the marketplace. And therefore you really need to, you know, understand that and get that across to the investor as well. So again, it's proven to the investor that you know your marketplace, and then that gives the investor confidence in that you have a realistic plan. And of course, as an investor, we'll drill down into that. So we, you know, as Chris said earlier, you know, we'll ask, okay, so how many leads have you generated so far? How many opportunities is that then, you know, given you as a business, and how many of those opportunities have you closed? That gives us some sort of ratio to work on. And then let's have a look at the greater picture. So, okay, this is your ratio of, you know, leads to opportunities to sales. Therefore, the marketplace that you are targeting, and again, I stress that you're targeting not the big global marketplace, that you're targeting is so big. Therefore, does the metrics work backwards to justify the revenue that you're forecasting? If it does, great. You know, we believe you, and then therefore we're likely to invest in you.
Yeah.
I think just to jump in at the end of that as well, I think what Gio said actually about competitors is really important as well. And also about it's sort of for a newly invested business, it's usually the CEO or the founder or someone like that who will be doing these marketing plans. And they might, you know, not have the full skill set to be able to understand that. They might not know where to get that data from or how to actually go about it. So what we're talking about is quite generalised, Matt. So I would suggest, as a tip for anyone, is to employ a consultant for a while just to help them with that, or go with an agency, you know, with someone who's got experience of doing it as well, where they can help set up that plan. Because at the end of the day, that plan is going to be one of the most important things that you can do for investment. So don't do a hash of it. Try and get someone who's been there and done it before, and try and work with those and try and understand exactly, you know, get them to ask you some difficult questions as well to really draw it out as to what you actually want from that business.
I think that's such a good point, Chris. You know, at Digital Glue, you know, we work with quite a few invested businesses or businesses about to receive investment or looking for second stage, and there might be early stage organizations, and actually having that third party, sometimes it's us, sometimes it's somebody else, who's just asking the owner or the entrepreneur the right questions. You know, they often have the knowledge inside in terms of the market or there's other things, but it's getting them the right questions to get it down and really be critical of what they're building. Because, you know, when you're building something, you're very much you're passionate about it, you're excited about it, you think it's the next biggest thing, the new unicorn or whatever it's going to be. And it's the critical questioning which helps you really focus in on what you need to do to grow the business. And that's what we've seen time and time again. When you do that, you really drill down to where the real meat is of a business, and that really helps them. So I'd echo that. I think that's such an important part of the process. very much for the early stage, but probably for many people, because sometimes you build a plan out, don't you? And that plan was good for a couple of years, and actually, is it still good? Is it still the best plan? You know, how are we going to revise that and review that? That's an important part of the process as well.
And I think when you're setting up a marketing department as such, no one tends to go for a manager first. They tend to go for, let's say, like a marketing executive or someone like that, who can just do those elements. So they don't really have a day-to-day plan to work from. And that usually is driven by the CEO, or, you know, usually a sales manager or something like that too. So yeah, I think having that external help sometimes does just give that little bit of priority to marketing.
Yeah, it's a really good point. It leads me on to something else, actually, Gio, which I think is really interesting when you're talking to different businesses at different stages that they come in. And I'm interested in this sort of balance. If you're looking at a company looking for some investment and the sort of levels that they want, they're kind of split between, what am I going to invest in marketing? What am I going to invest in sales team, for example? What am I going to invest in product development? Because that's going to be an important factor in any, you know, I suppose I'm interested in sort of, what are you looking for from that perspective as an investor?
Okay, that's an interesting question there, Javen, because, as you know, if you're really an early stage business, often the founder has come up with an idea for a product. Yeah. And then it's about, okay, how do we sell some of this product? But I'd like to turn it on its head, actually, and start, well, yes, you really need to start with a marketing plan, because sales is a function of marketing, and so is product, really. Because if you understand your customer base, you understand, you know, the types of customers you want to go after and their needs, then you'll develop a product to meet those needs.
Right.
So therefore, it's all about researching your customer. What will your customer pay for that product? How will you then promote that product? How are you going to sell that product? And by selling that product, I mean, are you going to employ your own salespeople? Are you going to go indirect through a channel? Yep. Therefore, how do you support that channel? These are all different decisions that you have to make. And these are all marketing decisions fundamentally, although they are classified as sales, you know, but generally it's a business plan. It's about, you know, getting this product to market.
It's really, really interesting, and perhaps not what I expected, actually, which is quite an interesting answer. But actually, with that research data effectively drives all the other decisions of, this is who our customer is, and by knowing our customer, everything else becomes clearer, or points towards different directions, give you certain options. Chris, from your perspective, that sort of sales, product, marketing mix, I remember discussing that with you a little bit. How does that shape up for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, B2B usually tend to be sales led, even if you have a strong marketing presence in that, because marketing feed the leads into sales. So even if you've got 100% of the leads coming in through marketing, they go into sales. So I try to, as Gio say, you try and put them together a little bit, and every lead becomes a sales and marketing lead. So it's sort of a one process. It's just that whoever works on that process at one point. B2C, sorry, like let's say a shop, you know, a retail outlet, and they tend to be more B2C. So it just depends on what way do you actually want to go to market. So Gio's 100% correct, and he says you have to do the research first. You have to try and understand that market and how you go to market. But once you understand that, I think it's, if I'm going to market in this particular way, we're going to become a marketing-led business, for instance. How do you then invest into that? So same as with a product, you know, as you mentioned, you know, across all three. If you've got a product which is, you know, it's sort of a startup business, as I mentioned before, you've got a good idea. You've got a product which is built to a certain level, but it might not be competitive in the market at the minute. So you might be entering a mid-market which has got a, you know, a really strong competitive nature within it, that's been established for maybe 25 years. So how are you going to turn your product into something that is competitive? So a business like that will probably need more emphasis on their product to bring it up to that level where it can be marketable. If you've got a good product which is competitive, then you understand, are we marketing led, are we sales led? And then it's all about, so what channel do we use? So Gio again was rightly saying, do you go through a partner channel? Do you go direct? Do you employ a sales team? And once you understand that and you've done your research, then it's it's down to you really then on how you invest that money into those teams. And is it people? Is it affiliates that you spend money on? There's loads of different options. So there's no one size fits all, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say.
No, and I think it's just really fascinating, isn't it? That I guess we're thinking about businesses here who they maybe have just received a pot of money, potentially. You suddenly got cash which you didn't have before, and it's making those investment decisions, isn't it, in terms of what's going to give me more ROI. And people, for example, sometimes feels like a challenging one, because you're going to bring somebody in, you've got to get them up to speed, you've got to get them working, how long is it going to take to see my ROI? Whereas you might look at a bit of marketing and some digital, and we've just talked about that, and you might think, actually I can plug that in and that's going to get me some leads tomorrow. So it can feel, and sometimes you can get distracted by a short-term solution, even if that's not the right thing in the long term, can't you?
And that's why I say about whether you're sales-led or marketing-led, because if you're a Netflix, let's say, you're marketing-led in that respect, you can push loads of money onto paid ads, let's say, and you can get your opportunities that come through that way. There's no one involved in that sales process. They can put a credit card in, sign up, and you can see that conversion, and you can do it from day one. If you're a sales-led business where you may be selling a solution, you've got a longer lead times and you need some interaction with a person, then that's where you need to invest in those people, because they're going to be the front of your business and they're going to be the ones who are going to progress that deal on. So yes, you might get the initial lead or so from a paid channel, but you still need someone to bring that lead all the way to being a customer.
Yeah, and I mean, Gio, I'm sure one of your metrics that you'll look at for some businesses, their cash burn. As you see, these businesses use that finance, and if they start investing lots of money in marketing and can't convert any sales, then you're going to have a big problem, aren't you? So
definitely so. Yeah. It's a case of them really. I think before you go to an investor, really, you need to have conducted some sort of marketing first and foremost, so you have some metrics to measure against. Because you're coming to ask an investor for more money to spend on marketing, therefore you need to prove to them,
show me it works.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's a really fascinating point, isn't it? Don't be walking into an investment scenario without having some really clear data. And you talked about it at the front, Chris, of we've done this is what it generates. We think we can improve that, or we can scale that, but this is what we're getting now. That's an important part of the step. So So we've got our investment, we've got a bit of a marketing plan that goes to that. I suppose if we get into a bit more detail about sort of a go-to-market, if you like, a little bit more. We've got our product ready. It's to your point, Chris, earlier. We're comfortable. What are we considering when we're developing that go-to-market? That we've got what kind of stuff comes into that, Chris, from your perspective?
Yeah, so I think the initial plan will obviously be top level. You won't go into a huge amount of detail of we're going to send an email on this date, it's going to be this content and it's going to have a link to this page. You don't go into that level of detail. No. But at some point you have to. So when you're going to market, and some of the key focuses of natural HR then consider is we've implemented marketing automation. So we use a tool called HubSpot. There's a few others like it, Marketo, Pardot, and a few others. I think Sales Fusion is one as well. But we use HubSpot, and we try and automate a lot of those admin tasks, so it frees up time to actually spend on, the main elements of marketing. So we use it for data segmentation as well. We then start looking into what do we want to do specifically. So for me, one thing I always believe in is that you should do 1 or 2 things great rather than 5 or 6 things average, let's say. So especially when you're just trying to get that investment, try and get one thing that works for you. For natural HR, and as Gio will know, is organic works very well for us. So we've got good rankings on certain transactional keywords, and we've also do generate a lot of leads from that. But to feed into that, we do a lot of content. So we create downloadable stuff to data capture, so then we can obviously get data into our CRM system where we can automate that going forward. Then we use things like our blog. We have award entries, and we try and do some PR on that. So all this content is then feeding the sort of SEO machine. That's what we've got, and that's one of our key things really of what we're trying to do. And then the digital side, we have other elements which just sort of plug gaps, I suppose. So paid search, for instance, anything we're not ranking on in terms of organic, when we try and plug that gap with our PPC. Yeah. And once we then get those contacts in, we try and nurture them through. So, we try and use account-based marketing. And if people don't know what that is, it's basically where we have quite a long sales cycle. So how can we keep in touch with them, to companies which have got a certain criteria, certain brackets, and we also use personas and that. So we've got the exact message going to the right person at the right time. So we try and use that method to nurture them through. So for us, it's all about bringing all of those channels together into one key thing of what we do. And then just outside of that, we work with a lot of experts. So HR experts, payroll experts, for instance, and we actually run webinars similar to what we're doing today, and Q&A sessions and things like that. And we use their knowledge to try and improve us, and also then we become like the go-to place for knowledge. And that's been really effective for us, because now we've started to build those relationships, and we've been getting our message out into different channels. So that's what we really focus on our go-to-market. We could go down routes of going to every event possible, which is HR related. We don't, because we don't see as much of a return on that as some other channels. We could go and spend hundreds of thousands, for instance, on paid search, but we don't, because we see more return from doing this sort of relationship building and content, and adding value to our customers and our prospects. And that's the one thing that we really try and focus on.
It's really, really interesting. And there's lots there, isn't there? Gio, I'm interested from your side. Obviously, that's obviously quite specific to the business at Natural HR. So that's really interesting, and I think makes lots of sense. And that sort of, I love that piece around being useful to your customers. I think that's just such a powerful play. Personally, I think it's such an important part of business. But in terms of from an investor perspective, at what stage are you looking to see that sort of detail, Gio, where you want to understand, okay, great, you've shown me kind of customers and whatever, but now show me how you're going to deliver this. When are you looking for that, and what are you looking for there?
That comes out really in the DD, as it may not come out in the first few meetings or the first meeting, because the first meeting is more high level. We want to really make sure that first and foremost you understand that marketplace, and then we'll test that knowledge of the marketplace, just as Chris has highlighted there. He knows his marketplace. So when we're asking those questions, okay, so who is your customer, and how are you going to, and where are you going to spend your money? Chris was able to tell us there he's not going to spend money on, for example, events, because those events don't always produce the right number of leads. He's not going to pay for a lot of ads, because that doesn't work. But if it generates more content, PR, that sort of thing, and then put that content onto the website and webinars, then they get people to the website, and the more people that come to the website, then the more opportunity there is to sell. So you can see that they're starting to articulate how they're going to go to market, and they understand the detail. And I think that's what you need to get across to the investor. Maybe not on the first meeting, but as the investor drills down, that's what I want to understand.
It sounds to me sort of like a sort of continual credibility building piece, really, Gio, as they sort of come through the process with you. Initially, got enough understanding at the top. Okay, I'm going to ask you 3 or 4 more questions now, and I still need you to understand and have enough information for me to show me that you've got clear understanding of how you're going to deliver on this effectively.
Yeah, exactly. And and some of the investment will be used to test some of those market opportunities, in terms of, because you may not have been doing every single bit of marketing that you've wanted to do, but you probably then want to spend a little bit more to try out. And an investor won't be averse to you trying But as long as you're not going to sink a whole lot of cash and without testing and measuring, etc.
That's a really, really good point, actually. Sort of, I'm interested in that because I guess people could come in to a pitch or an opportunity to conversation, or maybe avoid coming to you because they're nervous that maybe they don't have enough data or they haven't got all the information. So I'm sort of when people are coming with perhaps a, not a fully formed strategy as Chris is perhaps presenting today. What are you looking for them to sort of communicate there? Kind of.
Well, I suppose really it's what the investment is for, isn't it?
Right.
And at what stage that the business is at. I mean, if the business is slightly earlier stage and it's looking for that seed investment from perhaps angels and early stage investors, then an investor probably won't expect such a fully formed plan. But the later stage you are, and the different types of investment you're looking for, then obviously your go-to-market strategy needs to be that much better and that much more robust to scrutiny.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's fantastic. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah, I think just to chime in, sorry, on the end of that is, as Gio said, don't prepare to fail, because you will do at some point. You've got to test these things, and some things will work. Even if you're the best expert they'll ever be, and you move to another company, and then that company, what worked at a previous one might not work at this one. But it's fail fast, and learn from it. So the faster you fail, the more successful you'll be. Yeah. So don't prolong it.
Yeah, and the less costly that failure is.
Yeah, I think it's such a good point. People come to us as an agency and say, "Oh, I've got this product in this market that you've never worked in before. Which tactics are going to work?" And very often, our honest communication back on that is, "Well, we don't 100% know. These are our best estimates, guesses based upon based upon our experience and similar markets and these other things. But we're going to run these and test these, and that test and measure." And I think you'll probably talk to this. I hopefully won't oversay what you're going to talk about, Chris, going ahead. But the ability to know how to track things and know how to understand how am I going to measure that, I think is such a big step in all of this, isn't it? In any metric that you put forward, any promise you're making, okay, and I'm going to measure that how effectively. And you mentioned it with SMART earlier, didn't you, Chris? Measurable. Measurable isn't just that you can have a number, it's that you can get the number.
Yeah. Well, there's that famous quote, I know that we spoke about it before, Matt, who actually said it, but that famous quote from, half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I just don't know which half, and whether that's Henry Ford or John Wanamaker, and that, so it's still true today. There's an element of, you've got to try these things. You won't be able to track every single item, but it's getting a lot better. And if you're working more digital side, you can start to track that a lot more. So you've got things like cost per click. You've got number of engaged contacts, I suppose, within the business, cost per MQL, as we talked about earlier, and cost per SQL, cost per customer or acquisition. And then you've also got, even cost per, 1,000 impressions and all that sort of thing. So you can really break it down. But it's without that evaluation piece set up initially, then how are you going to do that? And that's why we use things like HubSpot to be able to track all of those channels which we're using, and just make sure that we've got the data behind it and we can make quick decisions if we need to, or, as I said earlier, fail fast.
Brilliant. So, okay, I guess driving on, we've a little bit. What are the sort of what are the slip ups? What are the things we should avoid? What things would we avoid? So we're thinking about our marketing plan. We're thinking about our go to market. Gio, from your perspective, what are the absolute catches that we want to miss out on?
Yeah, I think the one thing to, if you want to summarize it in a couple of things to avoid, because obviously you can go into a long list of things. I would say if you're approaching an investor, I would avoid the general statistic about your market. And what I mean by that is the market is worth 17 billion, 18 squillion, whatever that is. Or it's the global market. But you need to really drill down and show the investor that, how much of that market can you actually address, and are you going to target? So be specific rather than generalistic. That's the bit of advice I'd give you. And if you can, focus on your top 10 customers or prospective customers, top 20, top 30. Show the investor you've got a hit list.
Yeah. Okay.
Rather than just a general number. So
it sounds like, so avoid generalizations, and that, I think that's such a great point. Yeah, the global market for this product is, yes, well, I'm sure it is, but.
And the other thing to avoid, which we see quite often, is we're going to spend X amount on Google ads. Well, it's not really helpful to an investor unless you say we're going to spend X amount on Google ads, and here's the data to back it up. This is cost per copy. This is the return on investment. This is the number of leads it produces. This is the lifetime value of a customer. Therefore, if we spend £1, we will get back £10. Therefore, it makes sense, because there is a danger, and we've seen investment plans that come to us where it costs more to actually acquire a customer than the customer actually delivers. So why are you bother trying to acquire a customer when that customer will never pay back that acquisition cost?
So that's a really interesting point about including data. So we might think we've got our data and we're going to know how we're going to invest our money. You know, if you give us 100,000, we're going to put 25k here and 20. Well, unless that is backed up with a good reason for that investment, it's going to be a problem, basically.
Yeah.
Really interesting. Chris, from your side, sort of slip ups, things to avoid that you'd pinpoint?
There's probably two from me. The main one would be, I touched on it earlier about doing one or two things really well, rather than spread yourself too thin. Most people try and create a marketing plan or go onto Google, type in template, and then you've got all these things if you should use this channel, this channel, this channel, and that. And they just put it in there because they feel that they need to, but you don't. You know, just really, as Gio said, work out where your initial leads are coming from at the moment, and continue to grow that channel. Spend more money on it if you need to, if it's proving to be a success, and don't just put something in there just because you feel like you have to. Yeah. So that's the first one, is make that your marketing USP, I suppose. You have a product USP, but make that channel, you know, you do that the best you possibly can, and that becomes your marketing USP. And I think the most important one, I suppose, from me, is that just because you get investment, it doesn't mean that it's going to be successful. You've got, companies every day receiving investment, and, just because you've got this extra money where it makes it a bit more comfortable, you can invest into marketing, sales, and your product, doesn't mean it's going to be a success. So you still have to create those goals and work towards them. You still have to work out what works, what doesn't work, so again, that fail fast, and it's not going to be an overnight thing. So if you get investment tomorrow, let's say for £200,000, and then in a year's time, it doesn't mean that your business is going to be at what you anticipate it to be, because you have to execute this plan, and you have to execute it well. So money doesn't always drive success. So just bear in mind on that one.
It's a really interesting point. Gio smiles knowingly. I mean, it's an interesting point though, Gio, isn't it? Around, you've made an investment, of course, and you want to see that company flourish and grow and deliver a return on that investment, as we do in our marketing efforts and other things. But I suppose from Midven's perspective, it's not always about, deliver it in 6 months or a year. That's not the expectation, is it? I'm interested to talk about the patience around that. I think it's quite an interesting point that you guys have spoken about in the past, I think, as well.
Yeah, I think any investor that going into an investment realizes that may not be the first and last investment. They have to be prepared to invest further, and they have to be prepared that it will take longer. I mean, after all, it is a plan, and things happen. For example, if we sat here in January 2020, none of the companies that we had invested in, our portfolio companies could foresee what was going to happen, over the next 18 months, and still happening now. Therefore, it doesn't always go to plan.
No. Okay.
And I think a lot of investors expect that. But I think the important thing is to be realistic about your plan and try and back it with data and execute.
Yeah,
where possible.
I suppose one of the things that kind of interests me, because I think the lack of a plan is probably one of the most consistent things I see when we talk to companies. The lack of a marketing plan, the lack of sometimes a business plan actually is another area. So I suppose I'm interested from both your sides. Maybe I'll go to Chris first here. Is it sort of, you obviously create a plan, and from our conversation, you've got a pretty detailed structure of what you're going and looking after. So this might be more difficult for you to think about. But what are the risks of not having a clear plan, or when your plan kind of perhaps it's a bit older or it's been running for a while? What are the risks that come when a plan's out of date or isn't relevant anymore or needs a new one? What happens there?
Well, I think whether it's a overall business plan, whether it's a marketing plan, whether it's a plan for product, or how account management might work, and any type of plan that you have, there's going to be pitfalls on that. I mean, one is going to be lack of buy-in from the investors. Well, not only the investors as well. If you're creating that plan, your own leadership team needs to buy into it, and then obviously the board need to buy into it. So having a plan will actually build their trust, as Gio's mentioned a number of times, about having something that is specific and laid out. You've got the research and having that sort of investment into that plan is going to draw out a much better conversation with investors. And also having a plan, I think, will always make you think one step ahead. You'll be proactive and not reactive. So when you're being reactive, you're too far behind. That's already happened or it's happening, and you're only reacting to it at that moment. If you're being proactive, you can start to dictate the market a little bit more, and then your competitors have to try and catch up with you. I think as well, think about team members. If you've got a team of, let's say, 4, and you haven't got a plan of what you want to try and achieve, how do they know what they're going to be working on? They're again going to be reactive. They're going to be stressed because they don't know what's coming up. They'll probably be a little bit unfocused. You might even lose them as well, because who wants to work in an environment where they're getting different things left, right, and centre? Where they can't actually focus on anything entirely. People like structure, so give them some structure. I think as well, the company will have goals. Let's say it's X amount of revenue over a certain amount, a time period. If you haven't got a plan, then how do you expect to hit that? What does each department need to do to create a plan to hit that company goal? So you won't have that element. From a marketing perspective, you won't have the consistency of communications, that sort of integrated marketing communications. So that's going to be a little bit different. I've seen many companies where they create elements which look completely different, or different colours, different brands and that. And how can someone get that, resonate well with your business on that? And, every successful business really has a marketing plan. So without one, it's going to be pretty difficult to become successful.
Yeah. And Gio, from your side, if you see a poor plan or a lack, non-detailed plan, or you get in a situation where you see one where you haven't got one at all, really, what's that doing from your perspective?
Well, I think Chris has summarised it very well, but if I was just to, cover it off in 2 things, if you're a business looking for investment and you haven't got a plan of any description, then I'm afraid you're not going to achieve any investment at all. First and foremost,
strong start.
You've scuppered your chances of raising investment. And I think if you're a business that is, established or en route, if you haven't got a plan, then I think you could risk wasting money and also risk attracting the best talent to your business, because people like to work with organised people.
It's really interesting. You've both raised sort of talent, really, in a couple of times actually. Obviously, you both raised it just recently, but Chris, you said of something a little while ago about the marketing USP. Focusing on a couple of things when you were discussing, things to avoid potentially trying to do too much. And actually, I thought that was really interesting around recruitment, because if you're trying to build a team out of people to market, and that one thing you want to do is, for example, content, you're going to need people who can produce great content for you, aren't you, Chris? That's going to be a strong part of your team. Sort of it builds out the recruitment plan and lets people be part of something they know they're having a great contribution towards. Such an interesting thing around, you build it, without a good marketing plan, how do you know what to recruit, who to bring in, and where's that going to come from?
Exactly. It all just drip feeds on further. And from my perspective, people are the best asset of any business. So you want to be able to keep the best people, you want to be able to attract the best people. And if you're going after a certain skill set, you're going to get those best people rather than someone who's done a little bit of everything. Now, they might work for a certain level, get your business to, you know, a point where you want it to be. But realistically, then you start need to looking at skill sets. So, yeah, again, for me, people are the most important asset. Try and keep the ones that are good, you know, and to do that, you need a plan. You need to give them focus. You need to challenge them as well. I think that's the most important thing, challenging them every day.
Yeah, okay, that's really, really interesting. So, yeah, obviously, really appreciate your time this afternoon, guys. It's been a really interesting conversation. I guess if I was going to wrap it up, if I was going to perhaps maybe a couple of things that you'd really look to recommend to people either looking for that investment, Gio, or if they've just received it, what would you be? Right, okay, a couple of things I'm really going to drive in on.
Yeah, I think as without repeating myself, and I will be repeating myself really, is the fundamental thing if you're looking for investment is really prove to the investor that you know your market inside out in terms of customers, who your prospects are, who your distributors will be, who your competitors are, you know, what works, what doesn't work in terms of promotional activity. The more you have the knowledge, and you know, the more you can show the investor how you're going to exploit that market. And that's what, you know, that's what we really want to understand is, can you exploit that market? And then for those that have received investment, well, if you're looking to then work with your investor, is to monitor the results of your marketing spend and be prepared to adjust your plans accordingly. But again, it's based on data, based on what, you know what your efforts are doing out there. You know,
and that point about adjustments is just so important, isn't it? You know, just because you've had a plan doesn't mean it was the right one at the beginning, doesn't it? Be willing to take it on board, see what the market does, see what happens, and then go from there. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's foolish to think that if you keep doing the same thing and then expect a different outcome.
Yeah. Definition of insanity, I think, Mr. Einstein. Right. Chris, from your side, any sort of, I mean, we've probably covered a lot of it, but a couple of points that you'd really zone in on?
Yeah, I agree with Gio, really. Use that data on that, but also create a strong brand and narrative. So get something that investors can buy into, because having a strong story, having a strong brand behind your business is something that's going to put you above and beyond a lot of competitors. So people like stories. Try and build one around your business, and that's where that why, how, and what can come into that. I think having some maybe specialist help, as I talked about earlier, to help with that plan, whether that's a mentor, whether it's an agency like yourselves, and that can give you that initial boost and try and help you to build it out of what you need it to be. And another one that we haven't really touched on, but I've just thought about it, is about technology, actually. So if you get to a certain stage with your business and you haven't got the technology in place, or you've been using other technology, it's so difficult, and I know this from experience, it's so difficult to migrate systems to use the one that you actually need. So try and get the technology in place before the growth. You know, have something that's maybe a little bit too good for you now, but something that can scale with your business. Because once you do start scaling, you don't have to go back to the start and try and, you know, change everything. And it's so difficult to migrate data, to try and get reports set up again and that. So try and get the best software that you can afford at this point, to try and actually help with your marketing efforts. And I suppose the final one really for me is, investors are there to make money. You know, that's the whole point of it. So as a business, you're trying to make money. The investors are invested in you to try and make money. So your task really from having a plan is just to show them how you're going to do that. How are you exactly going to make money for them? How are you going to make money for yourself? And are you a better investment than everyone else who's going to them? And if you always have that in the back of your mind when you're creating any sort of plan for investment, how am I going to make more money than my competitors? Use your USPs, use your brand, use your story and things, use that data to back it all up, and that will give you a really good picture of how you plan to do that over anyone else.
That's such a strong insight, and I think it's a great one to sort of wrap up on, because the reason I like that so much is because to me, an investor is a customer of a, in many ways. If you're seeking investment, then you're pitching to a customer, aren't you? In the same way as you would pitch to a potential customer in the future. So understanding what that investor's motivated by and interested in, and Gio, you've been kind enough to share some of your insights and the thoughts on what's going to be ticking your boxes today, which is fantastic. And it's the same, isn't it, there, Chris? So I think, and I love that, because to me, that's the underpinning thing for today, which is, understanding your customer in detail and really starting there is where it all begins. It all starts there, really knowing who we're talking to, how we're going to approach them, how we're going to engage with them is where it all begins in terms of setting out that marketing plan. And it's going to give us the strength and the confidence to go out and say, and this is how we're going to approach it. Not everything we do is going to be right. That's okay. But we know that how we're going to fail with that, how we're going to measure that, and how they're going to come through as customers. So that's been a really, really interesting chat for me today. Finally then, so thank you so much for your time today, guys. Really appreciate you coming on board for Sliced, and hopefully look forward to chatting to you guys again soon.
Yep, it's been great being on. So thanks for inviting us as well.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Thanks a lot, Gio.
Likewise. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.